You're listening to the Bombad Generals.
General?
Hey everyone, Matt here. Now, we've been aiming to put out the main episode of Bombad Generals with myself and Seth every 2 weeks. That means that every other week, there's a gap in between in the off week where currently we haven't been doing anything, but we want to start slotting a few things in there. So one of those things is tournament reviews, where we sit down with someone who attended the event and kind of talk about storylines coming out of the event, their preparation, their thoughts on the meta, stuff like that. So for this week, we're going to try that out for the first time with our friend David Zelenka from Yavin Base. He was at PAX Unplugged, so we're going to talk to him about that. There's a large tournament about every month here in North America, so we're going to aim to do one of these podcasts at about that frequency. So next podcast would probably be following LVO and so forth, so keep an eye out for that. And then just a final note, we are recording this before the big points change on December 8th. So we're not going to talk too much about the meta and the high performing lists at PAX because really we don't know what's going to change. Not too much point in diving deep if all that's going to be moot at the end of this. So hope you enjoy. Here's the interview.
Hey, welcome to the Bombad Generals. Today we're here with David Zelenka, also known as Endless in the Discord. David, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty great. Thanks, Seth.
Great. And then we also have our co-host Matt.
I'm here as well.
Yeah.
Man, I got billed above your co-host. What's going on?
We do things a little differently on the generals here.
We do.
I think before we get too far, I do want to address the elephant in the room. Some people are saying that Todd, our third co-host, isn't real. Now, he wasn't able to make it tonight, but David, if you've met Todd, if you could describe Todd in 2 words, how would you describe our third co-host here, who's definitely very real?
3 children in a trench coat is what I'm going to go with.
Okay. I think no more questions. Thanks for the interview.
Yes.
Just dead silence. Got it.
We just needed a witness for Todd.
It was all a scam. We do have some real questions, though, for you.
David, in the weeks leading up to the tournament, how did you test and refine your list?
Well, I didn't quite know what to play going into PAX when I decided to play, so I looked at some of the top stuff and was just looking around at various articles, and I decided I wanted to run Shadow Collective, and I really wanted to run Maul because that's kind of what I've been running recently. So I looked for lists that were not the usual meta, but had performed well in tournaments that were of a large size. So I seized on the Black Sun spam lists with buses that had been doing well at Gen Con last year. And I thought to myself, let's see how this stands up. And so I put my list together based on some lists that I'd already seen on the internet and edited it to, reflect the style that I wanted to play, which was the Maul 1 bus. And I felt like I could change some things, knowing, having a fairly deep knowledge of the game, I could change some things around and kind of get away with it competitively. So like, for example, maybe I think, the Black Sun Scattergun is less efficient than the Black Sun Vigo with Magdet. So I made some changes that way. But in terms of like testing and refining, once I had what I thought was a good list, I started to play it in every single game that I had a chance to play. I have a toddler, and so it's kind of tough to get reps, but thankfully I have a very loving wife who understands my hobby, so I'm able to get some practice in, and I was taking it to everything I could, large tournaments that were local to me, playing on TTS against people that I knew were very good players, and I even had a chance to play against a player that had taken the very same style of list to a tournament finish at Gen Con. His name is Weebear. So yeah, it's basically a combination of knowing what you want to play and then seeing how it works against some known good players, essentially. And so I I went out and did that, and I didn't really need to make a lot of refining. It was more just like an execution thing, and honestly, like getting the reps in to make your execution solid is really, I think, my biggest takeaway from the whole experience.
Before we get too far away from it, one thing I do want to pick up from what you're saying that I like is you mentioned, at the very start, what was the start of your process, going out, kind of taking a look at the internet and what's out there, what are people running. I think sometimes there's a stigma around, what could be perceived as net listing, or taking lists from the internet, and maybe people think, oh, that's something that noobs do. But no, people who know the game, I'd say you're someone who knows the game really well and thinks about Legion and list building quite a bit, and still it's a great source for inspiration to just get your mind rolling and think, hey, what's out there? What's doing well? Just reducing the amount of work that you have to do instead of building it from the ground up. Just get your mind primed and then tweak it as you see fit. So I do appreciate that you mentioned that part.
I looked at all the lists that were succeeding, and I thought, what are some lists that are less well known that I could just learn and play? And I think Black Sun Spam was definitely one of those things where it's like no one's really talking about it, but it was still winning. Mm-hmm. And that to me was the big source of inspiration for me to actually like pick it up and start learning it. And I still plan to continue playing it even after the points change.
Yeah. So how many? You talked a lot about taking it to everything you could, getting a lot of reps in. Rough games wise, how many times do you think you played it before the tournament? And do you think that was enough?
I'd say about 10, and I would say no, it was not enough.
Oh damn, that's a lot. I feel good if I get maybe 5 games in before a tournament. 10's a lot.
I'm one of those players that I'm actually kind of slow on the uptake when it comes to list building and execution, and really it's execution. And that's another thing about net listing, by the way. People say, oh, net listing is for noobs, but you can net list and have absolutely no idea what the heck you're doing, mm-hmm. and you get clobbered, and then it's like, well, did it really matter? And thankfully Legion is a game where execution really does matter, especially when you have a force user like Maul, for example, where he's the engine of the list, and if you lose him early, you are dead. And unfortunately I played a little bit too aggressively with my Maul, which is ironic because he's a dark side guy. You say, the dark side's all about aggression, but it has to be calculated.
We're looking at before the tournament. What are you kind of doing to prep? Now you've arrived, you're at PAX, day one, you start lining up across the table for opponents. What's your process as far as the things you do to assess a table, figure out, hey, do I want to be red-blue if I have the bid, or which table side do I want? How do you approach the game in the turn 0 that's so critical?
Well, Maul Black Sun has a battle deck that is really quite strong. The Bus and Maul have some very specific objectives that they want to play on. I really like to be blue if possible. Unfortunately, the way I built the list, I built it expecting not to be blue against the really high bidders. I only bid 3 mm-hmm. points, and I was blue, I think 4 games out of 5, because I was beating all the 800, 799, 798s. And that's actually like a lot.
Is it you walk up, someone says, oh, I'm at 800, they say a number that's higher than yours. Are you just instantly one of those guys who's like, okay, yeah, I'm blue? What side do you want?
Yeah, for the most part, that mm-hmm. Luckily I'm playing at PAX, and so I've got Nick Bodner making tables, and Nick Bodner is one of the best people in the terrain making business, if not the best person in the terrain making business right now, just in terms of what he produces for tournament. And when I say making, I don't mean like, I don't mean like creating STLs or doing the printing. I mean just like, painting a set of STLs and like getting his tables together with tournament play in mind. He's really like the best in the business. And so like to the point where like the unofficial name of PAX Unplugged is the Nick Bodner Open. So knowing that, I can fairly confidently be blue when I can, because I know my deck is better. for me. I don't, and I know the list can't bid into like the high teens, which is where a lot of the bidding lists are. And so I just said, if I have to be red, I'm going to steal every line of sight blocker possible and try to get Maul into a position where he can work with their objectives.
Yeah, I like what you said about the tables. One of the things I think it's an easy kind of trap to fall into when you look at pictures of tables, whether they're from tournaments or on Facebook or whatever, there can be tables that look really nice and they're painted up beautifully that are absolutely terrible to play on competitively. So it is a real skill that thankfully some people like Nick have run in tournaments to actually make tables that are functional and useful, because that's a different thing than a table that just looks dope in a picture.
Yeah, and there's no standardization. So you're kind of at the mercy of whoever donates the terrain.
David, you ran a force user. Do you worry more about terrain having a force user or not?
Yes. Having the ability to jump one is just a game changer. And you need to know whether you'll have easy access to line of sight blockers near the middle. And that was something I personally was way too aggressive about. Just like not like relying too much on the bus to protect me, because the bus is a great line of sight blocker until it isn't. And when I say that, I'm talking about the fact that you have to angle your bus at a very specific angle. And like one of the tricks in the battle deck, and something that actually WeBear was telling me about the way he ran his stuff, is like the reason you take fortified positions in your battle deck is that you can put a barricade near the middle if you have the deployment zone ability to do that. You put a barricade near the middle and you lean the bus on it, so that way the bus turns into a line of sight blocker more effectively. And so I was relying very heavily on the bus. I was like, well, I brought my own terrain. And it sort of worked until it didn't. When it didn't, I was up against some serious jank. Like I fought double snail in my third game, which you never see. That's like serious jank, and it kicked my butt because the snails can just like roll up to the bus and see over it.
I think that's one of the big things about real life tournaments for me. You know, when we're talking about Invader TTS, you get a long heads up on not only the map you're playing on, but the list you're playing against, and you can kind of think through and figure out what its tricks are. Real life, it's a totally different beast where you roll up and, you know, first impressions you think, oh yeah, that's jank, and then it's not until it's too late that you're like, oh, but those are those are the tricks that it does. Oh, dang it, I got wrecked by it.
Yeah, that reminds me of two things. Okay, so number one is you want to win all your games consecutively, because if you lose your first or second game, you end up in what I call the jank tank, and that's a phrase I borrowed from X-Wing. And in real life games, you have the people that are playing like some really funky stuff, like Kalani double snail with shells and E5S spam, which normally doesn't work against pikes, but because you're not playing pikes, it works against you. Mm-hmm. And Kalani with LTA and HQ uplink, not HQ uplink, comms relay on Kalani, so he can relay his order and then direct AI unit to the other snail with link targeting array. Like, he's producing snails that have triple aims that way and are producing like 7 to 8 hits very consistently. And he's at 10, so he's going last. The snails are like 160, like, and I doubt snails are going to get touched in the points pass. So that might be something for CIS to look at in the future, actually, if they want to run something cool.
I think for me, there are definitely games where you kind of almost prefer to run against something that's meta, because you kind of know how the game is going to progress. Against a double snailed list, you don't really know how that's going to happen. And I think it all kind of loops back to, at the start, one of your things that you are looking for in the list building process is not only what's something that's succeeding, but that's kind of flying under the radar. Because often if you're running that top meta, unless that list is so incredibly good that no one can beat it, with tech, people are teching against it and people are prepared for that. Whereas the thing that's kind of just below that, waiting in the shadows, people aren't thinking about and don't have a plan pre-made in their head for it.
Yeah, my opponents were surprised consistently by the fact that I had like, oh, they have precise, oh, they have blast at range 1. They were kind of confused and amazed at what the Black Suns could do at short ranges. For that exact reason, they just didn't really know what Black Suns do because they never really faced it before.
When your opponent is leaning over to read your unit cards or read your command cards, you feel good. You're like, okay, I got something up my sleeve here.
Or you play like Maul's command cards and you're like, is that how that works?
I remember going to a tournament and my opponent saw my list and he said, "You could fit all of that in there?" I said, "Yes." Made me feel really good.
Yeah.
David, next question. What were some storylines for you coming out of the tournament?
Well, 5th Trooper had a lot of regicides. I'm going to talk about them because most of them were there. So like Evan was there running a 2019 gun line, which I thought was pretty awesome. It was Bosk and Krennic. And I totally misplayed my game against him. And I regret it heavily because that was a game that was definitely in my pocket for like several turns that I kind of just flubbed at the end. But yeah, storylines in the tournament. Kyle Blizzard Force going 5-0,
yeah,
despite having a concussion.
Mm-hmm.
Like he had a concussion in a car accident, so he.
That just goes to show what an incredible player that guy is. To battle through all of that and come out on top shows how good Kyle is and how stupid Blizzard Force is. A little bit of both, we'll say, but mostly the former.
I really don't want to discredit Kyle. He's possibly like one of the best Legion players on Earth.
He's definitely one of the best. He's quite possibly the best, for sure.
He's not number 1 in North America right now, but he is up there.
By the time this publishes, he might have overtaken me, we'll see. But he's gone to 2 tournaments in the past 6 months and won them both handily. So not just Kyle too. I think for me, looking at the game uplink, looking at the top 8 article that the 5th Trooper posted, the storyline coming out of it is just how strong Empire was. We talk a lot about Blizzard Force, but we've got Evan making the top 8 with Bosk and Death Troopers. We've got Blizzard Force, but like a Blizzard Force with Veers also making it. We've just got a lot. I think 5 out of the top 8, all Empire. And a lot of that is going to survive through the points update. For those, we can all sit at home and read the recap articles or look at the game uplink, David. But as someone who was there at the tournament, what's something that you want to highlight from behind the scenes as something to broadcast out to the world? And by the world, I mean like 6 people.
The Legion community at high-level events is just incredible. How kind and how non-toxic they are. And even when we're salty, we still are like not nasty and mean. We're like one of the most chill communities, and just the vibe is just incredible. And we're all there to play our favorite, like what is probably our favorite game. For me, definitely my favorite game. But like behind the scenes, just like going to one of these events and talking to the organizers and the judges, they're super chill. And I can't imagine like an event where that's not going to be the case. But I don't want to like take away from the specialness of PAX, because PAX is just a ton of people enjoying board games and miniatures, and that's kind of the environment you live for. And every time I go to one of these conventions, and every time it ends, I'm just like, oh man, back to reality. It's like a separate dimension where this thing that you love is loved by everybody else around you. So
I've noticed a lot in especially higher level events for Legion that it's super welcoming to even new players that come to a high level event.
Also, the gentleman that went 0-5, I'm so sorry I forgot your name, but I really appreciate you for sticking it out and not dropping like my round 1 opponent did.
Yeah, good for those guys as far as like keeping at it. And at the end of the day, we're all just there to push miniatures around. So now, let's say I'm someone going into 2023, I can only hit up maybe 1 or 2 tournaments, what would be the pitch for PAX, but also maybe some cons, some pros, cons? Help me make my decision. Why or why should I not be interested in going to PAX 2023?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that you're going to be playing on like the highest quality tables that the Legion community has to offer. I say that without any reservation. PAX like it just has Nick behind it. He's a really great driver of that community out there on the East Coast, and he does Atlantic City as well. So if you're looking at PAX Unplugged or Atlantic City Open, those are 2 events that Nick has a hand in, and he really drives it. And his terrain is really great. I have absolutely no complaint and nothing but positive things to say about the terrain. And the terrain is so integral to your gameplay experience and the effectiveness of your army. And Nick has mastered, I think, the art and science of it. That's like the biggest recommendation I have for PAX, is just the terrain is incredible, and you will not show up to a tournament, play on a bad table, and be like, oh man, I wasted my time and my money.
Yeah, that sucks. That feeling sucks, where you walk up and you're like, I just got screwed hard by this terrain, and now my weekend is not ruined. As he said, you're there to play dice, you're there to roll dice, push minis around, but it leaves a bit of a sour taste in your mouth when that's your undoing.
I wish I could tell you more honestly things against it, because that would give a more balanced review. But as someone who just did the Legion and didn't really do much else, I only kind of dipped my toes in the convention. There's so much to do that I didn't get to do. So I wish I could give you a more balanced review, but I just have nothing but glowing things to say about the terrain overall, and the prize support was also off the chain. Like, and again, this is Nick and his other judge David. They worked really hard to make this happen.
You know what? We can live with some positivity in the tournament.
Yeah.
Our first tournament recap here. We're not against it.
This isn't Facebook.
Yeah.
If you could take one thing from PAX and have it at every other tournament besides terrain, what would it be?
Honestly, the light up table numbers. You had these
all right.
these hollow lamps that were really, really cool. They did color shift, and they did all kinds of stuff. You had these light up table numbers that looked super professional. I'm a sucker for LED stuff, so I really like those light up table numbers.
All right.
That's
maybe,
cool.
maybe that wasn't as profound as what you were looking for
Not
there.
at all
No,
what
I
we were
love that.
expecting, but those cool little things that really makes it.
Really brings the production value of the tournament, just brings it up higher, which is awesome. I love it.
I'll say another thing too. There were no tables that were up against each other. Every table was spaced out from one another. So there was no short edge to short edge adjacent table. So you didn't have to walk around any rows. You didn't have to walk around to do line of sight checks. You didn't have to put your stuff on another person's table because you're all crammed in for space. Nothing like that. So that's another thing I'd take it and have it at every other tournament, was the ability to maneuver around the tables like that. But I know that sometimes that's not possible because you have so many people. Who knows what it's going to be like at Worlds when we have a bajillion people coming in. But I would definitely take that to every other tournament, and if I could, was just the spacing of the tables.
You actually invest a lot in the community by hosting your live stream Yavin Base. And we know that you go out to a lot of tournaments and stream them. Like you went to SoCal this past year and Lone Star Open. And we'll see you hopefully a lot streaming in 2023. But this one you played at, I want to ask, which one do you like better? Do you like streaming a tournament, or do you like playing in a tournament better, and why?
Well, after streaming LSO and after streaming SoCal, I was definitely feeling like a little bit of jealousy for the players, and just like I wanted to actually get out there and play in a big tournament again. But I gotta say, Streaming is a lot less pressure overall on myself because I'm very like results oriented when it comes to Legion. I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself to do well. So in terms like just to answer the question more generally, I definitely think streaming is just an easier experience. I don't know which one I like better. I'm definitely less depressed after streaming because I went 2 and 3. So and all on my own errors. I just Force users are hard, man. Like they're hard.
They are.
And you have to be so aware of the board state at every turn. You can't be at game 5 and disembark into 3 standbys. Like that was just ridiculous.
We didn't really give you a chance to flaunt your credentials, I guess, at the start of it. But you have, I think it was 2018 Gen Con. You were the
2019, yeah.
2019 Gen Con. You were the big winner there. So I mean, I imagine there's always a bit of that, like, hey, I want to chase that high again, because it does feel really good to come out on top at the end of it. And I'm sure
the game was so much easier in 2019 because there were so much fewer releases, and we didn't have COVID, and people weren't just like in their basements playing TTS.
These kids in their basements on a computer, they ruined Legion. But I mean, the feeling, I'm sure it's hard to match on the streaming. But I know as someone who goes to events, it does feel really special to have someone there investing their time to display it to the world and to put it out there and to make it feel like a thing as opposed to just an event that happened, but if you weren't there, it's like it never happened to you.
Yeah, that's one of the joys of streaming is that I get to like invite people into the experience of the event, and I get to like just narrate a game that's unfolding in front of us, and I really like doing that. I think it adds a lot to the tournament.
David, is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just want to like plug a few things if that's cool.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm trying to build my presence on Twitter, even though the platform is kind of a dumpster fire right now. So if you still like Twitter, twitter.com/endless5055, that's my handle there. Of course, please check out Yavin Base on YouTube. I'm likely going to be migrating to YouTube. I'm probably not going to stay on Twitch much longer because that platform is also having its own problems. But please do check out Yavin Base on YouTube. Subscribe if you are interested in keeping up to date with the latest content releases there. Definitely going to be going back to doing more strategy content in January.
Yeah, appreciate you, David. And you can find all of his links down in the description below.
Thank you so much for coming on, David. I think you are a fantastic guest to really put it on easy mode for us as we figure out how we want to do these interviews. So thanks a lot for dropping by.
Stay Gungan, kids.
This has been the Bombad Generals.
Listening to Bombad Generals is not scientifically proven to make you a better Legion player. Side effects may include bad dice rolls, missed triggers, aim losses, bankruptcy, divorce, vomiting, and sudden death. Ask your doctor if Bombad Generals is right for you.